there is something museums never show you. When you see a mummy behind glass, perfectly lit, with a little card that says its name and its date and the dynasty it belonged to, what you're looking at is the final result of a process that lasted 70 days, and that was, without any possible exaggeration, the most violent, the most intimate, the most extraordinary thing a civilization has ever done with a human body. What museums do not show you is what happened before that body got there. What they do not show you is the workshop. And if you knew what was happening in that workshop in the year 1300 BC, on the banks of the Nile, with the desert heat crushing everything from outside, and the smell of natron and resin and flesh soaking into every surface inside, what you feel when you look at that mummy would change forever. This is the real story of how the Egyptians prepared their dead. And I guarantee you that when you finish this video, you will never see ancient Egypt the same way again. If you are interested in history that shakes you from the inside, subscribe now and hit the bell, because this is exactly what we do here every single week, and you cannot miss what is coming. To understand mummification, you first have to understand what death meant to an Egyptian of the New Kingdom. And the short answer is that it was not what it is to us. Death for an Egyptian of 1300 BC was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of the hardest chapter, the human soul. According to Egyptian theology that had been refining itself for more than 1,000 years by that point, was not a single thing. It was a collection of distinct elements that separated at the moment of death and needed to be reunited carefully and with specific rituals so that the person could continue existing in the other world. The Ka was the vital force, the energy that animated the body during life, and that after death needed to return regularly to the physical body to feed on the offerings the living left behind. The Ba was something closer to what we call personality, the unique character of each person that could travel between the world of the living and the world of the dead, but needed to recognize the body in order to return to it. And the Ak was the transfigured form of the soul, the final state the deceased aspired to reach after overcoming all the judgments and trials of the underworld. For all of this to work, for the soul to complete its journey, and the dead person to reach eternity, the physical body had to be preserved. It had to be there, recognizable, intact, available as an anchor point for the traveling soul. No body, no eternity. That simple and that brutal was the logic. And that is why mummification existed. It was not a decorative ritual or a vague cultural custom. It was a survival technology designed with a precision that took centuries to perfect, and that by the year 1300 BC had reached a level of sophistication that modern scientists still do not fully understand. The process began the moment someone died, and it began with an urgency that anyone who has ever lived in a climate of over 100 degrees Fahrenheit can understand. In the heat of the Egyptian summer, an untreated body began to decompose within hours. There was no time to lose. The priests specialized in this work, who called themselves servants of Anubis, the jackal god who presided over death and mummification, arrived at the home of the deceased and transported the body to a special place known as the Wabit, which in ancient Egyptian means the pure place, or in some texts, simply the workshop. The mummification workshop was not a hospital or a temple or a crematorium in any sense we might think of today. It was a working space, utilitarian and functional, located generally on the western bank of the Nile, on the side where the sun set, which for the Egyptians was the side of the dead. The smell that permeated that place was unmistakable and permanent. Natron, which is a natural salt the Egyptians extracted from the desert, and that was the central ingredient of the entire mummification process. Resins of cedar and myrrh imported at the price of gold from Lebanon and from southern Arabia. Palm and linseed oils. And beneath all of that, impossible to fully disguise with any amount of incense or spices, the smell of bodily fluids and organic matter being processed by expert hands. The priests who worked here were professionals in the most modern sense of the word. They had learned it from their fathers, who had learned it from theirs. They knew every step of the process with the precision of a surgeon and the familiarity of someone who has done the same thing 10,000 times. The first step was the most dramatic, with a metal bronze hook that they inserted through the left nostril. The embalmers extracted the brain from the skull, not all at once, but in fragments, stirring the hook inside the cranial cavity with circular movements until the brain mass became liquid enough to drip out when they tilted the head. What they could not extract that way they dissolved with special oils also introduced through the nose. The brain, according to Egyptian theology, was not the seat of intelligence or emotion or any important function that belonged to the heart. The brain was simply organic matter that decomposed quickly and had to be eliminated. It was discarded without any kind of ceremony, thrown away. The most complex organ in the human body, the most sophisticated object the known universe has ever produced, thrown away because the Egyptians believed it served no purpose. Here I want to ask you something, and it is important. Write to me in the comments, which of all these facts seems most incredible to you so far? Because I have been studying ancient Egypt for a long time, and it still surprises me every time I think about the distance between what they knew and what they did not know, between the precision of their technology and the conceptual errors they made. Your comment not only helps me understand what interests the people who watch me most, it also helps the algorithm carry this video to more people. Write to me down below. The heart, on the other hand, was the most sacred thing. It was the seat of intelligence, of emotions, of memory, and of personal identity. It was the organ that the god Anubis would weigh on the scale of divine justice at the moment of a soul's judgment, comparing it to the feather of the goddess Ma'at, who represented order and truth. If the heart weighed more than the feather, it meant the deceased had lived a life burdened with sins and errors, and the monster Ammit, a creature composed of crocodile, hippopotamus, and lion, devoured it on the spot, destroying the soul forever, with no possibility of eternity. If it weighed the same or less than the feather, the deceased passed on to the Egyptian paradise, the field of reeds, where life continued in an idealized and perfect way. The other organs, however, were removed, and this process was a genuinely precise surgical operation that took hours. With a knife of obsidian, the volcanic stone that is the sharpest material found in nature, sharper than the finest modern steel scalpel, the embalmer made an incision on the left side of the abdomen, and through that incision he extracted the lungs, the liver, the stomach, and the intestines. Each of these organs had its own preservation process and its own storage container. The famous canopic jars that appear in every Egyptology museum in the world. The 4 jars had lids shaped like the heads of the 4 sons of Horus, the divine protectors of the organs. Imsidi, with a human head, protected the liver. Hapi, with the head of a baboon, protected the lungs. Duamutef, with the head of a jackal, protected the stomach. And Kabesanuf, with the head of a falcon, protected the intestines. Each jar was filled with its corresponding organs, soaked in natron, sealed with resin, and placed in the tomb alongside the body, because everything had to be available for the resurrection. Everything had to be there. Once the body had been emptied of its organs, the longest and most tedious phase of the process began. The body was covered completely with natron, inside and out. The abdominal cavity was packed with bags of natron, with linen cloth soaked in resin, with aromatic wood sawdust in the poorer cases, or with precious resins in the cases of nobles and kings. And then they waited 40 days. 40 days with the body submerged in the salt, dehydrating slowly, losing the water that was the fuel of decomposition, hardening gradually until it became something that was no longer exactly a body, but was not dust either. It was something in between, something preserved, something that could last not decades, but millennia if everything had been done correctly. After the 40 days, the natron was removed and the restoration phase began, because the dehydrated body was not in good visual condition. The skin tightened and darkened. The features became distorted. The eyes sank into their sockets. The embalmers had to return to the body an appearance that the soul of the deceased could recognize when it came back to visit. They filled the cheeks with linen. They placed artificial eyes of colored stone or glass in the empty sockets. They applied perfumed resins and oils to the skin to give it flexibility and protect it. In the cases of pharaohs and great nobles, they painted the skin with pigments, red ochre for men and yellow ochre for women, following the same convention used in the tomb paintings. They placed ritual wigs, amulets specific to each part of the body, heart scarabs, necklaces of gold and lapis lazuli, They transformed what had been an almost industrial medical process into something that increasingly resembled a work of art. And then came the bandages. The wrapping of a high-quality mummy was a process that could take an additional 15 to 20 days and required hundreds of meters of fine linen, the same fabric with which the Egyptians made their luxury clothing. It was not wrapped in any random way. There was a specific order, a ritual sequence that the funerary texts described with precision. First the fingers, one by one, each wrapped individually, and sometimes with their own gold fingertip coverings for the wealthiest. Then the hands, the arms, the feet, the legs. Then the torso. And in each layer amulets were interspersed, figures of the gods, formulas from the Book of the Dead written on papyrus and rolled up inside the linen. The final result, after weeks of meticulous work, was an object unlike anything any other civilization has ever produced. Compact, geometric, imposing, covered in perfect bandages, and with the funerary mask painted over the face, ready for eternity. This entire process, from the moment of death to the moment the body was ready to be placed in the sarcophagus, lasted exactly 70 days. Not 69, not 71, 70. The number was not arbitrary. It corresponded to the period during which the star Sirius, which the Egyptians called Sabdet and associated with the goddess Isis, disappeared from the night sky before reappearing on the eastern horizon, announcing the annual flooding of the Nile. 70 days of absence and then rebirth. It was the most powerful natural cycle the Egyptians knew, and the mummification process was deliberately synchronized with it. The dead person disappeared from the world of the living for 70 days, exactly like the star, and then returned transformed, preserved, ready for their own rebirth in the other world. If you made it this far, you already know something that very few people who consider themselves fans of ancient Egypt know in detail. Mummification was not a mysterious and incomprehensible ritual. It was a technology developed with logic, with empirical observation, with centuries of trial and error, to solve the hardest problem any human being has ever attempted to solve: how to defeat death. The Egyptians did not succeed in the way they hoped. Their souls do not travel between the field of reeds and the tombs of the Valley of the Kings. But their bodies, those bodies that their priests processed with such dedication and such care 3,300 years ago, are still here. They are still recognizable. They still have names and faces and stories. And that, in a way that no other civilization has ever matched, is exactly what they wanted. Before you go, I need you to answer this in the comments. Do you think the Egyptians were right to be so obsessed with preserving the body? Or do you think all that energy devoted to the dead was a colossal mistake that took resources away from the living? It is a question that historians ask in earnest, and I want to know your opinion, because the answers people leave me in the comments always surprise me. Write to me down below. And if you want to keep traveling through time, the next video is waiting for you with another story that was never taught to you in any class either. See you there.